another fine podcast from the FIR Podcast Network. Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to a For Immediate Release book review. This is Shel Holtz in Concord, California, and with me on the line is my friend Richard Binhammer out of Austin, Texas. Hey, Richard.
Hey, Shel. Good to be with you.
So I think most people who know you probably know you from your days at Dell, but could you give us a quick thumbnail of your background?
Sure. 2006 to 2012. Was one of the first people at Dell overboard into social media, then what we called blogs. As you, the blogosphere, as you well know, Shel, and then moved on to work on our social media center of excellence with a view of trying to embed social across the fabric of Dell. 2012, I headed out on my own, and I do some social business, social media strategy consulting for groups looking to kind of take their social media to a next level. Do specialized work on social media and corporate communications adoption, and then with you, Shel, I have a very exciting service that we deliver where we basically audit the social media skills that you need and whether you've got them, and basically a gap analysis to make sure that you've got the skills to deliver the kind of social programs that a business needs.
Yeah, and something most people probably don't know is you got started in politics, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Back in Canada in the 80s, and I served a provincial cabinet minister and a federal cabinet minister, and then was in charge of the Prime Minister's daily briefing books during an election campaign.
So we're here to review Shel Israel's new book, which is called Lethal Generosity, subtitled Contextual Technology and the Competitive Edge. Shel, who's a friend to both of us, says in the book that it is essentially a sequel to The Age of Context, and I thought that was a pretty apt description. It doesn't lay out any brand new concepts of technology that serves customers. It's more like looking in the interim from the time that Age of Context was published to now, how organizations are starting to use these technologies to really, and you know, I got to say that Shel never uses these words, but surprise and delight the customer.
Yeah, and Shel, the other thing that I think Shel Israel does in this new book is, you know, in their first book, him and Scoble, where they did The Age of Context, and they covered kind of everything from, you know, healthcare to, you know, our refrigerators and doors and lighting. In this one, I think Shel really drills down on customers and business and how this changes the relationship between customers and business as it relates to those technologies, which is a bit of a, not only a deeper dive, but a different spin completely and different focus, I think.
Right. And he refers to this as lethal, pretty much talking about what's going to happen to your competition if you adopt these principles, suggesting that, yeah, I mean, certainly not in every case. I don't think the people who make a 79-cent can of soda need to do this. If that's your favorite soda, you know, commodities you're going to buy. But for a lot of the relationship type products and services that are out there, the suggestion is that if you adopt these principles, you're going to be able to beat the pants off of your competitor. And those that don't adopt these principles could well be endangered organizations.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting, Shel, is that he says in the book, you know, he doesn't really care whether traditional companies adjust or whether the new upstarts that are taking them on win, but what he's interested in is what's good for the customer. And the other interesting aspect of what's good for the customer here is, you know, he makes an argument, I think implicitly, I'm not sure he quite says this directly, but implicitly he makes an argument that kind of, it doesn't matter whether you're talking about, you know, cars or the cup of soda or, you know, any number of other things, that you need to look at the environment of mobile, wearable data, Internet of Things, location, and social media, and figure out how with those you focus not only on the customer, but add value to your products, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And those are the principles that he and Scoble raised in Age of Context, and, you know, spent most of the book explaining them. So this book is how they're put into practice, specifically at serving the interests of the customer.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we were talking earlier, and you mentioned Lyft versus Uber, and I thought that was an interesting comparison.
Well, it was just one of the things that, you know, for example, there you've got two services that are essentially the same, but, you know, Lyft, I think you pointed out in the book that Lyft offers more and different payment options than Uber does. And as a result, that's where they're being, they're putting themselves, in the face of the customer and frictionless in the sense that, anybody can use them. It doesn't matter how that there are more options to pay. Who wins that war? I think it's just interesting because there it is. We're not just talking about the technology and the service that Uber and Lyft provide, but it's also then how do you pay for them? And that's where I think, businesses, this book has a big message for business, which is step beyond what you're delivering and look around what you deliver. And that's the area where you become lethally generous.
Right. And, one of the things that I found interesting about, I was in a cab just a couple of days ago. I prefer Uber, but they weren't allowed to come get you at the airport. So I was in a cab and they had this decal in the window that said you can download their app and not have to use Uber because they'll send a cab that's nearby right away. And I was thinking, well, getting the car from the app is only part of that Uber experience, right? Because it's also the really clean car. It's a very courteous driver. You're never worried that they're going to drive you an extra 20 miles to bump up the fare because that's already taken care of in the app, right? It knows where you are and where you're going and calculates the distance.
Yep.
And you never even have to take your wallet out. And one of the things that I hate about taking a cab is that if I want to pay by credit card, they're going to haggle with me over paying cash.
Yep.
And there's none of that with Uber or with Lyft for that matter. So, it's this comprehensive experience. And Shel doesn't use the word experience that much in the book, but this really what he's talking about is delivering a great experience when you're engaged with that particular business.
Right. And the experience is not just the product or service that you're traditionally or is really actually being delivered. The other story I loved was the mannequin. Do you remember that story, Shel? About walking into I think it was Neiman's or Nordstrom, where you could take a picture of the mannequin and they knew exactly where if you liked what the clothes that were on the mannequin, but you wanted them in shades of blue instead of red, and you took a picture of the mannequin, and then next thing you knew, one of the floor people walked over with the different colored, but the complete outfit that the mannequin was in. That's again, that's thinking beyond what you traditionally think about as your product and service. Traditionally the clothes are on the racks, you go find them.
Right. So what the book is really talking about is using these various technologies to deliver, whether it's information or whatever, to the customer that the customer actually wants. May not have known that they want, but they're going to be surprised and pleased when they see what you're delivering rather than, intruded upon or interrupted. And I think Shel does a great job of explaining the technology in a way that non-technological people would really be able to grasp it.
Absolutely. And he outlined a lot of them, Shel. I mean, I've never really kind of done an inventory in the marketplace, but, he gets into everything from contactless payments to, beacons in stores, and kind of the iPhone in between and, a range of other technologies, LTE-D and some others that I wasn't completely familiar with. And I just thought to myself, boy, any business person that reads this book, even because he does provide kind of that inventory of technologies that are available, you can take the book and you can sit down and brainstorm 15 new ways that your business might add value.
Yeah, and you mentioned the beacons, and I'm certainly familiar with them, but I haven't really done a lot of digging into it. But he explained how the beacons and the geofencing concept were used at the Coachella Music Festival.
Yes,
and that knocked me out. I mean, I had nephews who went to Coachella, but they didn't tell me anything about this. I'm going to have to hit them up and ask if they got the app. But, geofencing is where you limit what you see to a geographic area. And they had a bunch of beacons around that would serve people who had the app, everything from where is the nearest bathroom to where can I get this kind of food to which stage is what band playing on, even helping you exit the parking lot the most efficient way.
Yeah, and I think it was not only where's the nearest bathroom, but where's the nearest bathroom with the least line, wasn't it?
Right, exactly. And that can be really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, the beacons was a big part of it, getting to understand the new version of LTE that's coming out from Qualcomm. I had no idea that that's where they were heading.
Absolutely.
With that technology. But
the other interesting thing I thought in the book, and it's towards the end, and it's an area I wish, well, there are two other interesting things. One of them is I thought throughout the book, Shel did a very good job of indicating, if you're a traditional business, the kinds of challenges that you might face in adjusting to the new world, and kind of, the whole issue of peer networks and how they require transparency, that rather than bricks and mortar, companies are depending on software programs, so he points a traditional business or a traditional business leader in a whole range of areas where they could think about what kind of new experience to deliver. And I thought that in that respect, it's quite a it's quite a serious roadmap if you really want to try and explore some new ways to look at things.
He also spends a lot of time talking about millennials in the book.
Yes.
The largest population of the workforce right now. And he made a point that I actually hadn't heard before. For everything I've read, I've read dozens of studies on millennials, but the fact that they're going to be the largest dominant demographic for a long time because they're not having kids at the pace the boomers and the Gen Xers did.
Yeah, and the fact that, he raised, so often we get the kind of, millennials are selfish or, self-centered or however you want to put that. I thought he raised some really interesting points about the collaboration aspects amongst millennials and how they rely on their friends for information and context. And I just thought, that, not that he was being Pollyanna or anything, but I thought he put a whole different kind of perspective on millennials as business people and as buyers and customers.
Yeah, he did. And in addressing the fact that, first of all, millennials, as you say, are more interested in recommendations from their peers than they are what you're going to market to them or advertise to them. But also the fact that they'd rather buy an experience than a commodity, a physical object, a possession.
Yep.
And when you talk about delivering these great experiences the way he does, that fits right into that concept. And, as the millennials account for more and more of the purchasing dollars that are available out there, accommodating their preferences is going to be huge.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting too, in that respect, Shel, that, on both the millennials and recommendations, but just generally, he makes the point about, I'd rather hear from a friend if something was a great product or service than I would about, a banner ad on it. And he talked about the whole power of, sharing online. And, I was amazed where he had the figure, and I think it was from Facebook, about 2.7 billion times a day, 2.5 billion items are shared. And I thought to myself, wow, that's the biggest third-party validation, since mass media was introduced, really.
Yeah, it really is. And he talked about customer service, delivering great customer service, which, I mean, so many of them don't, right? If you think about the call centers in most organizations and where they report and what they're measured on, they're usually evaluated on how quickly you can get somebody off the phone so that you can make as many of those calls as possible. I've maintained for at least 10 years that I think the call center is reporting to the wrong department. It should be reporting to public relations because that's your public and they're calling for information from the organization. That's the first point of contact, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And it shouldn't be based on how quickly you get them off the phone and how many calls you deal with in a day. It should be based on how satisfied the customers are at the end of that call. And it's not just the phone calls now. It's people reaching out via Facebook and via Twitter. And companies need to be ready not just to answer those questions, but to go above and beyond in addressing the issues that the customers are having.
Yeah, that was one of the things that he highlighted when, I mentioned that he raised a number of kind of organizational questions. And he said, I think he said it in the book directly, is the call center is it a way of actually building your relationships with your customers, to your point, or is it seen as an expense?
Right. I'll tell you a quick story. My daughter went to a wedding a couple of weeks ago in Milwaukee, and she traveled with her best friend. It was her best friend's brother who was getting married. So she was with her best friend and her best friend's husband. And the husband was in the bridal party, but when they were making their connection, he forgot to take the tux out of the overhead. He
Right.
left it on the flight. So they got to Milwaukee, and in a panic, they called customer service for, I'll tell you, it was Delta Airlines. And they said, sorry, there's nothing we can do by the time you need the suit for the wedding. Sorry about that. We'll have it shipped back to your house. So they were rushing over to a store to buy a new suit when my daughter's best friend tweeted the situation. And within 5 minutes, they get a tweet back from Delta saying, we have your suit. We're putting it on the next flight to Milwaukee. You can pick it up at the airport in 2 hours.
See, you shouldn't have to do that.
No, I mean,
that should have been the first line of defense, not the last line of defense,
Exactly my point is people go ooh-ah over this sort of thing, the kind of online customer service that Frank Eliason is known for innovating at Comcast. But why do you have to go to that second step? It should be wherever you make that first point of contact, they should go out of their way to figure. I mean, if they could figure it out from the Twitter social customer service team, the customer support team in the call center should have been able to figure the same thing out and had the same resources.
But that's a point that Shel makes in his book, is that putting customers first means being obsessed with the customer. But he also talked about that customers aren't kind of targets to be marketed to. In fact, they are the marketing program.
Exactly.
I mean, based on the Twitter response, if that had been your first line of response, I mean, imagine all the good things that they would have said about it.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, they are saying good things about Delta, but imagine if it had just taken the phone call to do that, they probably would have been singing the praises even more.
Yeah.
So, he talks in the book about pinpoint generosity.
Yeah, and pinpoint marketing.
Right. Which is
very different than their traditional mass marketing.
Right. It's highly customized. I've been referring to the market audience of one in some of the talks that I do. I'll give you a great example of this. Warby Parker, and Shel talks about Warby Parker in the book. But if you send them a question by email, by Twitter, however you get the question to them, they're going to send you the answer as a YouTube video. They'll get somebody to do a quick video of a customer service rep showing you the glass frames and answering your question. It goes up to the customer service YouTube channel, but then you get the link back to find the answer. And I think this is brilliant because not only is it a direct message to you, but thousands of other people can end up seeing that you got this direct personal message.
Well, and anyone else that runs into that problem, if they search YouTube, I mean, it's probably, carefully SEO'd so that it shows up well in YouTube. I mean, imagine if you've got a similar question. Now the answer is right there on YouTube. And by the way, you've avoided a call.
Right. So I think we both recommend this book.
Oh, absolutely. And the back end of it is also, the front end is full of examples and data and technology and ways to look at things. And you've touched on the back end is equally interesting, where we talk about, the changes to marketing and the pinpoint marketing and the move from mass and banner ads to experiences and storytelling and, how your customers are actually your marketers. It's very interesting.
Right. And when we talk about experience marketing, I think, the key to doing it effectively is marketing something that people are going to want to talk about with each other. And there's a KLM, Royal Dutch Airlines video that shows this little experiment they ran where they bought presents for passengers waiting in the gate area based on what they were able to find out about them in their social media profiles.
Right.
He makes the point in the video, nothing too fancy, not a car or a house.
Right.
More like a Nike fuel band or an upgrade to give you more leg room, or one guy who was flying, I think, to Mexico to build houses for Habitat for Humanity. They got a first aid kit or something like that. But then they monitored what people did on Twitter as a result of this. And from giving these individuals these little gifts, they got over 1 million impressions on Twitter. Yeah. And all of those came from the customers and people who retweeted what the customers were talking about.
Yeah, that's a perfect example. The other interesting one, Shel, and I know that we're almost out of time, but I mentioned it only because I know that you've blogged about these kinds of things before. But I also thought that his take on traditional corporate social responsibility is kind of a goodwill sidebar versus, the millennials and how they actually value that. And it's not a goodwill sidebar. It needs to be part of a business.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And in fact, I'd go beyond CSR because I think most people think CSR is more or less greenwashing.
Yeah.
It's talking about the little things that we're doing and making a big deal out of it. But Shel makes this point in the book. He uses language very close to this, is that you have to be as interested in social cause, whichever one or ones you've embraced, as you are in making a profit.
Yeah. And kind of how it aligns with your business and making it work with or as part of your business, which I thought was really interesting too.
So again, we both recommend this book. It is Lethal Generosity, Contextual Technology, and the Competitive Edge. Just came out by Shel Israel. We'll have information on the publisher, the ISBN codes, and where you can buy it in the show notes for this episode. But Richard, thanks so much for joining me for this book review. I really enjoy doing these with somebody else as opposed to just lathering into a microphone.
It's nice to have a conversation about it. Absolutely, Shel. It was fun. Glad to catch up with you.
You too, Richard. Take care.
Bye-bye.